was fired by the CEO's son 48 hours before my bonus hit. $92,000. He smiled like it was business, said restructuring required fresh leadership, and escorted me out before lunch. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I made 3 phone calls instead. Each one ended politely. Each one removed a safeguard he didn't know existed. Within 2 weeks, a $210 million merger collapsed, regulators stepped in, and the board demanded answers. Suddenly, my bonus didn't matter. Watching arrogance unravel did. My name is Dana Whitaker, and being fired 48 hours before a $92,000 bonus was supposed to feel devastating, but the moment the CEO's son delivered the news with practiced confidence and a grin that didn't reach his eyes, I understood something important, which was that this wasn't about performance or restructuring, it was about entitlement, because he had been installed as interim operations lead during a pending merger and needed to prove decisiveness fast, and removing someone senior enough to be visible but not powerful enough to resist looked efficient on paper, and when he told me my role was being eliminated effective immediately, I nodded, thanked him for the opportunity, and handed over my badge. Because panic only empowers people who mistake authority for intelligence, and as I walked out carrying my personal items, I didn't think about the money, I thought about the merger, a $210 million deal I had spent 14 months coordinating, aligning operational dependencies between 2 companies that barely spoke the same compliance language, and my role wasn't public-facing, which meant leadership barely noticed it, but I was the liaison connecting 3 external verification partners whose approvals were required to finalize the integration timeline, and those partners trusted me personally because I was consistent, precise, and transparent, and over time that trust had replaced formal escalation paths, something I had documented repeatedly and warned leadership not to ignore, warnings acknowledged politely and archived without action, and after my termination, the company sent out a cheerful internal email announcing organizational alignment, and the CEO's son held a town hall about momentum and youth, while I went home and waited 24 hours, because I wanted my decisions to be clean, unemotional, and unquestionably professional, and the next morning I made the first call, informing the primary verification firm that I was no longer employed and therefore no longer authorized to provide representations on behalf of the company, which triggered a standard pause clause, nothing dramatic, just a hold pending reassignment, and the second call went to a cross-border compliance auditor, explaining that any future inquiries should be routed through legal rather than operations because the designated contact had been terminated without transition, and the third call was to a regional integration consultant, notifying them that milestone attestations would need to be rescheduled because the internal owner of record was no longer active, and each call ended politely, professionally, and according to protocol, and none of them violated confidentiality or ethics, but together they removed the informal glue holding the merger timeline together, and within 72 hours internal teams noticed delays, and within 5 days partners requested clarification, and within a week the acquiring company raised concerns about risk exposure, and leadership responded with confidence until confidence met deadlines, and deadlines missed create consequences, and when the board asked why the merger timeline was slipping, the CEO's son blamed vendor inefficiencies, unaware that the inefficiency was simply the absence of my unpaid labor, and as pressure mounted, legal discovered that the verification partners had been communicating exclusively through me for months, and that no formal reassignment had been filed, and when they reached out asking if I would assist temporarily, I responded that I no longer had authority, access, or insurance coverage, and any involvement would require a consulting agreement reviewed by counsel, and suddenly the $92,000 bonus they had avoided paying looked insignificant next to liquidated damages clauses and investor skepticism, and the acquiring company invoked a material change review, freezing progress pending assurance that operational continuity existed, and assurance requires names, signatures, and accountability, none of which leadership could produce quickly, and the board demanded a full explanation, and explanations sounded weak when contrasted with documented warnings I had issued months earlier about dependency risk, and within 14 days the merger was officially paused, stock dipped, analysts speculated, and the CEO's son's authority evaporated in real time, and the board initiated a governance review focusing on termination practices during critical transactions, and when they interviewed me, I didn't editorialize, I provided timelines, emails, and procedural facts, and the review concluded that my termination constituted a material operational disruption, triggering breach conditions, and the merger collapsed shortly after, not because of sabotage, but because trust dissolved, and trust is the real currency of complex deals, and the CEO's son resigned quietly, citing personal reasons, and leadership announced a strategic reassessment, and I was offered my bonus retroactively along with a consulting role, which I declined, because money doesn't repair judgment, and returning would have implied the failure was accidental rather than structural. And people later asked if I felt satisfied, but satisfaction wasn't the emotion, clarity was, clarity that professionalism doesn't require silence, it requires boundaries, and that removing someone without understanding what they hold isn't bold leadership, it's negligence, and I moved on to advisory work helping companies map human dependencies before restructuring, teaching them that informal authority is still authority, and that arrogance often mistakes quiet competence for replaceability. And every time I hear someone describe a termination as clean, I remember how cleanly they thought they removed me, 48 hours before my bonus, and how messy the consequences became once reality asserted itself. Because systems don't care who fired you, they care who actually knows how things work.